I saw what could only be described as a getaway to some wondrous parallel dimension. Here's your look at the new Boss Fight Studio Sam and Max the Rabbity Thing. Sam and Max, the self-appointed freelance police, are the stars of video games, comics, and an animated TV series. These roguish scamps, doling out swift, blunt force justice, are now the posable action figures you never realized you need. Before we get the review underway for this rabbity thing, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall Max actually stands. I'd like to as well thank the folks over at Boss Fight Studio that provided the sample of Max that we could have a look at in this review. Just FYI, the review of Sam will be coming up shortly after this. I think for the purpose of measuring just how tall Max actually stands, it probably would make some sense not to go to the point of his head, because of course his ears go a little higher than that. We're instead going to measure Max to the very top of his ears. That sounds like a good idea, right? Max from Sam and Max stands 4.4 inches in height. We can switch that over to centimeters, revealing that the figure is 11.2 centimeters tall. Must say I'm rather happy with the amount of accessories that Boss Fight Studio have thrown to both Sam and Max, of course Max that we will be looking at in this review. Starting first with the tiniest of critters, Max comes included with a little tiny rat. I would be willing to bet that the rat was probably molded here in gray plastic, but then all the details on top of it, all very nicely painted in a shinier pink. The hands, the feet, the tail, the ears, and the little tiny nose on the end of the rat have been very nicely applied. There's a little bit as well, black done also in the eyes. There is no posability on this little tiny critter. You can't move his head, you can't move his tail. Well, again, he has no posability going for him. But appreciate again the fact that they would have included a little tiny rat like this. Putting that to the side, anybody want to make a phone call? He comes also included with a rotary phone. Some younger viewers may be looking at this and say, hey, I had a grandmother who had a phone like this. Yes, I also had a phone like this growing up. The rotary dial doesn't actually work, so luckily you don't have to make those excruciating calls, especially the friends of yours that had the number 9, and you'd have to wait to make the full rotation before you pressed the next number, or rotated the next number. It actually does have a moving receiver, and you can see they've also molded the cord connecting the receiver to the rest of the phone. It's a very nice little accompanying accessory. One constant you'll see actually when we have a look at all the things that come included with these figures is they come with really nice molded painted accessories. So it comes included with the rotary phone. Moving a little bit then further over, Max also comes included with his little pistol. The pistol perhaps was probably done in brown, and maybe the rest of it was done in a gunmetal gray. Could it be also the reversed as well? But it does certainly have some nice sculpted work done to it. And of course this can also fit into his hand. Let's take the figure right now. Now you can really go either way. I mean, both the hands almost look like they cater to a trigger finger. These are the stock hands when you get it out of the packaging. Let's for the time being take the pistol and fit it into his one rabbit hand here. And when you twist it around, oh look at that. It looks like it was meant for this. You can actually see he holds the trigger perfectly fine in his hand. The other weapon of destruction he comes included with is a little tiny hammer. I really like the hammer, maybe one of the reasons why I left the accessory for the last. The wood grain that they've done to the handle end of it is really nice, and it has a very nice oversized cartoon look to it. And sure, why not? He has 2 hands, why don't we give him 2 accessories? Blasphemy, you would say? Why would you give him 2 accessories in both of his hands? Well, because he has 2 hands to do it. There we go. You can have him both the gun and, of course, the hammer also in his hands. Speaking of hands, were we just speaking of hands? We were, actually. Max comes included with a whole bunch of different swappable hands. Starting first, he comes with some closed fists. I mean, honestly speaking, with the amount of cool things he comes included with that can fit into his hands, I would be never really tempted the idea of actually having the figure displayed with closed fists. But they're there. I appreciate that they are. He comes with also a couple of grabbing or mauling hands. Somewhat ironic that I'm saying that. I'm having such a tough time to actually hold them in hand. You can see he has just a pair of, like, grabbing hands. These would be good, I suppose, for grabbing and holding on to the rat. And then he also comes with a couple of gestured hands, a peace sign if you wish, or pointing finger if you wish. He has those options available to his disposal. In fact, if you want to see how he looks like with his hands changed, let's go ahead and just remove the hammer for the time being. There we go. And all you really want to do is really hold on to the forearm area as you're twisting the hand off. You'll see what you're treated to as you twist the hand out of the socket is a rather long looking peg, very chunky looking peg as well. So it really would be in your best interest to hold on to this because you really don't want to be pulling against the smaller joint in the elbow. Then find the appropriate hand that you want to go with. I'm going to go with a pointing hand for this. Just twist that back into place. There we go. And you have him pointing while he's holding his gun. That's a little disturbing. Let's go ahead and take the gun out of his hand. We'll just put that to the side for the time being. The last of Max's accessories, and again, talking about the amount of stuff that Boss Fight have thrown to this line, he also comes with a couple of swappable heads. Now, just to do a comparison, because right now it'd probably be hard to gauge this, he has one head, as you can see, that doesn't have a mouth. Just a closed mouth, or absent mouth, if you will. You can see still the slotted eyes, and the rather nice pink nose in the middle there. And then he also has the open mouth with a big happy smile on his face. A little scuff there on the teeth. Oh, that fixed up rather quickly. Like I say, he does come with two swappable heads. Technically, again, 3 if you count this one right here. Now, this head right here, as we will be looking at shortly, does have an open mouth and an exposed tongue on the inside. I think when it comes time to eventually displaying these figures, I may go the route of displaying it with the larger smile like this. Now, the head, I will advise, take the time, spend a little bit of quality time with the figure and heat this up. You can do one of 2 ways doing this. You can either submerge this part in hot water, just to soften up the socket, or you can also take yourself a hair dryer. It's not only good for just drying your hair, and you can soften the socket on the inside there as well. Just enough to free the head off, to pop that off and replace with the other heads that you want to go with. Again, you can either go with this head, or my personal favorite of the 3, you can go with this head sculpt as well. Even though I have not softened the socket on a couple of these, I'm less inclined to probably just pop this off for the time being. Because again, when you're looking at it, it's a very narrow peg post right here. Again, I would recommend that you submerge this in hot water. I'm going to immediately do this to swap this to this head sculpt right here. But it's really clever the way that they've done it with the swappable ears. Well, not the sense that you're going to be swapping these out for interchangeable ears, but how easy it is to remove the existing ears. All you have to do, you would probably assume that these would be ball pegs. And actually, rather the opposite. When you pull these out, they're just more slotted than anything else. You can see how they fit into a half crescent moon shape. And then you can do the exact same thing on the other ears as well. Take whatever head you want to decide to display him with and just simply pop the ears in. One thing that they've also done too, as you can probably see, they've marked it L and R to tell you which side the ears go into. And just slot that into place like that. Then from there, of course, you can just pop the head off and replace it, or you may want to do the opposite. Pop the head and replace the head first, and then change out the ears. Maybe I might even just stick with this head. I'm not really sure. These are definitely my 2 favorites of the ones that come included with the figure. We shall stick with this head sculpt just for the time being because it kind of gives the best of both worlds. You have not only the teeth, but you also have the tongue on the inside of the mouth, and it does have a nice little bit of depth, certainly when you're looking at the figure. The paint on it, what little paint there is, because again, it's really only just the eyes, the nose, and then whatever bit of tongue and teeth you see there on the mouth, has been very nicely applied. The rest of the figure seems to be just the molded plastic. I want to talk a little bit about the plastic that they're using here, especially when you're looking at joints like this that are very small. I would suggest, of course, when you're taking the figure out of the packaging, to just very carefully see how much give these joints have. If you feel like they're hung up and they don't want to move, again, you can take the tactic of taking your hairdryer and heat that up a little bit just to soften it up. I didn't have to luckily do that when it came to the pegs. They, after a while, freed up rather nicely. And even though the pegs are rather small, the thing again I want to talk about in the plastic though, the plastic has a good feel to it. It's solid, but it doesn't feel like dense, brittle plastic. It almost seems like, again, the best of both worlds. A little bit, it's got a little bit of give to it, but it's also not a dense plastic either, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Again, I really like the head sculpt on Max here. And spin it around so you can see it certainly from the back. Really, again, also like the way how easy it is to pop and replace those ears with whatever head you decide you want to display him with. On the back of the figure, of course, you've got the little tail there. I like as well the way that they've sculpted the little tiny belly button. It's kind of just more like a Nike swoosh, swoosh right across the chest there. But the plastic molding is really good on these figures, at least again from the Max that we've looked at so far. If we flip the figure upside down, not only underneath are you treated to Steve Purcell 2020, but you're also treated to some rather nice paintwork on the underpads of Max's feet. He does also have peg holes on the undersides of his feet, but the figures don't come included with display stands. Let's have a look at the articulation here on Max. His head rotates all the way around because it's sitting on a rather large ball joint. Because of that, it can also allow the head to move down, up, and you can also rock it ever so slightly back and forth as well. As for the arms are pin and hinges. So essentially what it is, they're plugged in place, and then you've got the little track hinge that the arm can move out, forward, and back. And basically the same rule applies for the elbow. You can move that back and forth, and you can also twist the forearm. The hands then rotate on their own because they're pegged in place. They're not ball jointed, they're essentially just pegged in place. He has, of course, no articulation in his tummy tum-tum, but he does have also ball joints on the legs. The legs don't move out too much. That's as to the furthest extent of what you can get with Max's legs. Of course, they can still move forward and back. He has a bend at the knee, which also allows the lower leg to rotate, and Max has no then articulation in his lower ankles. It's certainly a fun-looking figure. When I was younger, I had a friend who had a Sam and Max video game on his computer. I used to then know, and that was the way I was really introduced to Sam and Max initially. And then from there, on Fox Kids TV, they ended up having a Sam and Max cartoon, which is something I really religiously watched on TV. I will say, like, Boss Fight Studio have done a real service to this line. Maybe not well known by everybody, Sam and Max, but if you're a big fan of Sam and Max, whether you were initially introduced to them in that PC game, the same one that I was introduced to, or you were introduced to them in that cartoon, it's a great looking figures to pick up and put on display. One thing I really like also about the Sam and Max line that Boss Fight Studio are putting out is the fact that we have brand new illustrations on the bottom corners of the packaging done by the creator Steve Purcell. I don't know if Boss Fight Studio tackle t-shirts too much. That's a lot of T's. But if they ever did release tees with this artwork, I would pick that up in a heartbeat. That same color scheme, that kind of reddish, I don't know, auburn color, and then you have the police car down below with Sam and Max. Definitely I would have picked that up in a heartbeat. The packaging is generally quite small, and yet still it manages to hold and house both Max as well as all the accessories he came included with. It wasn't really a surprise with the amount of accessories he came included with because I've been following this line online, anxiously awaiting for these figures to come out. But then when you actually see them in hand, with the amount of things that a small rabbit like this would come included with, like the rotary phone, I really like the fact that they come included with the rotary phone. Probably going to end up displaying the figure with the phone in his hand, because how many times do we actually get a figure with that old style rotary phone? Hey, my grandmother had one of them. I also had one of them growing up as well. I'm so very incredibly old. A big thank you, though, to the folks over at Boss Fight Studio that provided the sample of Max the Rabbity Thing that we could have a look at in this review. I know I've already probably stated a couple of times, but of course we will be having a look as well at his partner Sam in an upcoming review, so make sure you keep your peepers peeled to this channel. Make sure as well that if you're new to this channel and certainly would like to come aboard, that make sure you hit this subscribe button that's located just below this video, as well turn on the bell notification so you get those friendly reminders. And again, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.